Hey Highlands Social Studies students, it's Mr. Sir. I'm just doing this brief video to just go over the current events assignment that is for today now. You guys have probably seen stuff in the news related to what's going on in the United States with George Floyd. So as you can see, it's kind of that event which happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota has kind of cascaded into a larger protest that's been happening throughout the United States and even in Canada in some cities. And you're going to see a lot of terms, maybe if you've been looking at it, if you've seen stuff on social media of, Black Lives Matter, this movement that is all about essentially, it's even hard to explain, but Black Lives Matter, if we go to slide number 4, it says an international human rights movement originated in the African American community that campaigns against violence and systematic racism towards Black people. Now, if we know much about the United States, is that there's a long and turbulent history between African Americans and essentially white Americans. It's very complicated. It goes over hundreds of years, stemming back to slavery within the 1600s, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. But what I want you guys to do today, and what we want you guys to do today, is to look at this slide to show that we have. So it's going to go over terms like Black Lives Matter, and then other terms of white privilege, which is something you've probably heard about before, but maybe don't understand completely. And it's just looking at this protest movement and this movement of Black Lives Matter to bring justice and equality to Black people within the United States. Now, when you're going through this, I want you guys to click on this link here as you get to slide 7 to understand the situation. So we try to give you a little bit of background information. And I know honestly, it's too complicated and too long-winded to summarize in just a few slides. You could literally have an entire course on these things. I know Mr. Russo had said that. That's a whole other course. But there's a really good video here. If I click on this, it says, if you click there, it should open up this link to global news, and it's going to kind of give you some background as to what's going on and why there are these protests happening. So it's 2 minutes and 44 seconds. I would really encourage you guys to watch that, just to help you understand a little bit. Now, as it says here, if we go back to slide number 7, it talks a lot about, slavery ended in 1865, but in the United States, the fight for equality continued for well over 100 years. I mean, even in the 1960s, if some of you ever heard of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, that was a movement to essentially gain equal rights for African Americans. I mean, as it says here, even in the 1960s, and this is a time, my dad is American, he grew up while this was happening. He was about 10 years old. There's a lot of African Americans denied voting rights. A lot in some states, not the state that my dad grew up in, but a lot of other ones, Black kids and white kids weren't allowed to go to the same school together. They were segregated, they were separated. So that's where this term segregation comes along. And the main thing that especially ties into this George Floyd situation is that Black men and boys are more likely to be stopped, questioned, arrested, and even killed by police officers than white men and boys. Now, there's a link here if you wanted to go to an article that shows you that. There's a study that actually proves that. And then here's the thing about George Floyd. So this gentleman, this happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Actually, I lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is the city that it's part of Minneapolis, essentially. I lived there for a few years when I was in high school, because I have a lot of American family down there. So I know where this happened. I've been by there before. Yeah, it's not good. So this gives you a brief rundown of what happened. So, I mean, this man, George Floyd, was being arrested by police after they were called due to him using a counterfeit, so a fake $20 bill at a convenience store. The situation escalated, and eventually he wound up on the ground with a police officer placing his knee on the back of Floyd's neck. So for 8 minutes, this police officer had his knee on the back of Floyd's neck. Floyd asked the officer to stop and said he couldn't breathe. And after that over those 8 minutes, eventually that led to his death. So he died there on the street, and a bystander filmed the event. And that was widely circulated. Now, as a result of this, there have been a lot of protests happening. It started in Minneapolis, and then it spread throughout the United States. So this whole assignment is for us to understand what happened and why this movement is happening, and to actually try to connect it to Canada. So I won't go through all of these slides, but I mean, there's lots of great stuff in here. There's some really interesting quotes, a little bit of a background about what Black Lives Matter is. I mean, you're going to see a lot of that stuff, I think, on social media right now. There's a tweet from Jagmeet Singh, who's the leader of the federal NDP party. So grade 9s, you know who he is. We've talked about him. There's a link here with a video of Justin Trudeau. That's part of one of the questions you're going to answer, so make sure you watch that. And then there's some other pictures and quotes that are really important that we have a look at. And we need to think about this stuff. Now, it's really important that we're reflective, because these are hard questions. These are difficult issues for us to understand. And this is an issue that we deal with in Canada to a certain extent as well. So it's our job to think about racism and what's happening in the US and what's also happening in Canada, and what we can do about it, and how we can be positive influencers and change. So the assignment is posted in Classroom. So if I look on the assignment, I click right here, I click on the document, there are 4 questions. So go through the slideshow, read through each slide, examining the quotes, readings, and explore the links as well. Once you've done that, answer the following questions, respond in full sentences, and be as detailed as you can be. Be reflective and share your thoughts and feelings. So question 1, what does the Black Lives Matter movement stand for? Why do you think this movement began? Okay, so number 2, have you heard about George Floyd and the protests in the US before this lesson? What did you know? Number 3, why do you think the protests spread from Minneapolis to many cities across the United States? And then number 4, watch the video of Justin Trudeau on slide 9. Click the link. Do you agree that racism exists in Canada? What can we as citizens do about the issue? How can we fight racism? Okay, so there we are. Now, email us if you have any questions, and this is an important issue, so please take your time, watch the links, read through the slides, and I'm looking forward to reading your responses. Good luck, guys.